Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hi. I'm Sarah Montgomery, and I am honored and pleased to be your worship leader today. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix. Our minister, Reverend Christine Dance, is away today, and today's sermon is by someone you might have heard of, Reverend Susan Frederick-Gray. Susan was UUCP's minister for several years, and she's now the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the central organization for UUism in the United States. I offer a heartfelt welcome to those of you joining us for the first time today, whether in person or online. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix strives to be a spiritual community for our time, focused on diverse theological perspectives, radical inclusion, and the knowledge that issues of justice and equity shape everything that we do. And a very special welcome to all of you joining us via Zoom, YouTube, or Facebook. Everyone in the sanctuary, would you turn around and wave to the folks online? Hi. We are one congregation, no matter how we are congregating today. Please join me as we recite our covenant, and Nancy Schwartz will light our chalice. Nancy has grown up in this congregation and is headed off to college in the fall. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to share our strength in fellowship, thus do we covenant.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Benji Messer, UUCP's music director, and with me today are two other brass players in our community, Nancy Schwartz and Danny Doyle on trumpet. And our first piece is a love song that has gone by two different names. 160 years ago during the U.S. Civil War, it was known as Ara Lee, and later it was repurposed by Elvis as Love Me Tender.
Thank you, musicians. There is so much happening at UUCP, and you can find all about it on our website and in our weekly newsletter, Compass. Our congregation is one of 4 organizations that have been invited to attend an event called Sacred Earth, Common Ground this Wednesday, May 25th. It is designed to facilitate communication among people of different cultures, religions, and ways of thinking. Several of our choir members will perform there to open the event. If you'd like to attend, please sign up at the Earth Justice table at the back of the sanctuary. Now is the time to prepare for August and November elections. I know it feels like we just had elections, but they keep coming. It's the nature of democracy. So please make sure that you are on the early voting list. The link is on the Civic Engagement page of our website. And the International Rescue Committee, or IRC Welcome Center, is always in need of certain items. The Civic Engagement page is on the website, and it has a link to the most needed items and details of how to provide them. Our offering is split 50-50 with a community partner each month. We believe that this approach reflects our UU values. For May 2022, our Share the Plate partner is Phoenix Local Organizing Committee, a grassroots organization that has worked to eliminate poverty, inequity, and injustice for our Black community members since 2015. You can donate in many different ways. You can text UUCP STP for Share the Plate to 73256. You can donate through our website, send a check, scan the QR code on the boxes by the entrances, or pay by cash. If you're making your pledge to UUCP today, please indicate that with your payment. For all that you give to our congregation and to our community partners, we are so grateful. Today's service includes several videos created by leaders of the UUA. Here's the first one, a story from Reverend Susan Frederick-Gray.
I'm joining you here from First Parish in Cambridge, and I want to thank the First Parish community and Reverend Adam Lawrence Dyer for offering their space to us. First Parish sits on the occupied land of the Massachusetts people. A community of the Massachusetts people still live in Massachusetts in the community of Canton. I have a story for you today, and there's two things that are important about this story. Number one, it's a true story. And number two, it's an anonymous story. So I read this story many years ago in Yes magazine, and the author of the story was listed only as Jane B. I love this story because it speaks to the fact that even in incredibly difficult circumstances, that the presence of love, that acts of generosity and hospitality really are life-saving. Here's Jane's story. Jane and her brother grew up in the 1940s in Hollywood, California, a town known for show business. Now, Jane says that she and her brother were adopted by their parents, not because their parents loved children, but because their parents thought it completed the image of the perfect Hollywood family. A beautiful home in Beverly Hills, a fleet of servants, 2 adorable children, and a little spaniel dog. Jane and her brother hardly ever saw their parents. They were largely raised by the housekeepers and nannies. It was only on Sunday when the whole family went to the country club. There, Jane and her brother were expected to be perfectly well behaved, not to run around or get dirty, to know which piece of silverware to use at every course, to be seen but not heard. They were taught to speak only when spoken to. Looking back, Jane said of herself, "I wasn't a real girl. I was a cardboard cutout of a girl." Jane's best memories from her childhood were when she was with her grandmother. And one day, her grandmother took her to a rummage sale in a church basement. Now, this was Hollywood, California. So this rummage sale was filled with costumes and fancy clothes that were from the movies or from movie stars. Jane's grandmother gave her $2, which was a lot of money at that time, and said, buy whatever you want. Well, Jane went home with 2 armfuls of things, and as soon as she got home, she ran straight up to her room with all of that loot, and she started trying things on. Finally, she settled on a little pink night dress, a big broad hat, white satin gloves, and every piece of costume jewelry that she bought. She looked at herself in the mirror, and Jane was awestruck. She looked like a different person. She decided to give herself a new name, Madame Modifus. Now, whereas Jane was quiet, Madame Modifus was bold. And whereas Jane was shy, Madame Modifus was flamboyant. And whereas Jane always did exactly as she was told, well, Madame Modipus, she had a mind of her own. Jane, all dressed up, ran down the stairs across the yard to the house next door and knocked on the door. When the mother next door and her little son opened the door, their jaws fell open. Jane said, my name is Madame Modifus. May I come in for tea? Well, the mother and her son, they welcomed Jane into their home. They played for hours, and then Jane went back to her house. Now, any time that Jane had a little bit of time to herself, she would get all dressed up and she would run to the neighbor's house, and they just came to call her Madame Modifus. Jane ends her story by sharing how she now is a grandmother, and that one of her favorite things to do is to visit her own grandchildren, and that whenever she goes to see them, they wait for her outside on the yard, and when she pulls into the driveway, they jump up and down and scream her name, Maudie, 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 the only name they've ever known her by.
Yep. So the other 3 pieces that we'll be playing today are by the composer Tieleman Susato. He lived in Belgium about 500 years ago, or what's now Belgium, and they're very short. I have a feeling that the band would play them over and over and over again back in the day, but we're just going to play it once. So this is a round dance by Susato.
Now is the time that we share the joys and sorrows of our community. It is good to human together, to support one another, and to connect. Folks on Zoom, feel free to enter any joys or sorrows into the chat, and please remember to put your name at the beginning. I'm going to try to read them from my phone. We'll see how this goes. And those of you here in person, the joys and sorrows cards were at the front of the table for next week if you have something important to share. And we have joys and sorrows from last week and this week. While we let some of the joys and sorrows come in from Zoom, I'll share some of last week's joys. John LaBarbera shares that his Pearl Jam-themed overhead highway sign was noticed and retweeted by the band. And then at the concert, Eddie Vedder himself toasted John and the sign on stage. Congratulations. And John Colombo shares that yesterday marked 20 years of Army service and he's officially retirement eligible. Congratulations, John. Retirement eligible. Congratulations, John. We have a sorrow from John Hahn. He says he got into a car accident this Saturday. A sorrow from John Hahn, but still says he got into a car accident this Saturday. He's fine, but still shaken up a bit. Sorry for that. A joy from Kathy Kopak. Is your first time in the building. A joy from Kathy Kopak. Is your first time in the building. Yay! Right back there. Welcome. Sorry, it's a little toasty for you today. Hopefully we'll have it back to room temperature next week. Joy from Nancy Schwartz. She recently had a drama banquet where Nancy was awarded Best Supporting Actress for her role in Tarzan as Professor Porter, and had Nancy's final band performance at her high school. Congrats. All right, and two more sorrows to share. Three. First, from Vince and Kathleen Waldron, a sorrow that they had to put down both of their beloved labs yesterday. But we're grateful for the love they brought to our lives. And then Bill Snowden, one of my fellow worship associates and choir members, shares that he goes into hospital for surgery tomorrow. Let's hold Bill in our thoughts. And sorrows from Kat Granat. Her father was diagnosed with kidney disease this week. Let's hold Kat as well. And Susan Morris shares that Rosie Herman faded away and passed a couple weeks ago. She and her husband Frank were longtime members who contributed in many ways. Frank survives and he misses coming to services. Let's remember Rosie in our hearts. So let's send love and positive energy to each other. Folks in Zoom, feel free to turn on your cameras or click on reactions and post a heart. And folks in the sanctuary, please hold up a heart if you feel so moved. We're all connected. I invite you now to a time of quiet and meditation. Center yourselves. Put your feet on the floor if you wish, and settle in place. Let's take a few deep breaths and feel your energy flow from the top of your head down to your feet and back to the earth. For our meditation.
Dear ones, we will now enter a time of libations, lamentation, and prayer. The pouring of libations is a centuries-old ritual performed by many cultures. At the core of this sacred ritual is the calling forth of personal and collective ancestors across the millennium and across all space. Libations are poured to honor life, all life. Before we begin, it is just and holy that we honor the original lands of the indigenous community or communities where we live. As I am here at Community Church of New York, in New York City, specifically Midtown Manhattan, I must honor that these lands are of the Lenape peoples. The Lenape offspring of the Algonquin civilization and includes present-day New Jersey, New York, and Delaware. If you know them, please call to mind the indigenous peoples where you reside, honoring that these lands are not ours, and we must always honor this truth. I will now call upon the ancestors from all directions as I remain before you, even virtually. I invite you to respond Ashe as each direction is honored. The pouring of libations. To the east, lands of the rising sun, elements of air with the color yellow, ancestors of the east, be with us now. Ashe. To the south, welcoming the ancestors of African ancestry, the element is fire and the color is red. Be with us now. Ashe. To the west, lands of the setting sun, the element of water with the color of blue, the emotional realm, ancestors of the west, be with us now. Ashe. To the north, the elements of earth with the color of green, the direction of sustenance and grounding. Ancestors of the north, be with us now. Ashe. Lastly, I pour libations to the heavens, the plants, the seas, the animals, and all winged creatures. Be with us now. Ashe. Our time of lament. Friends, both near and far, we have been and are in some of the most difficult times the world has experienced in over 100 years. COVID-19 continues to unleash havoc on this country and the world, with over 500,000 people dying here in the United States, the most the world over, even as over 1 million vaccines are being given daily. The level of grief so many are experiencing with isolation, feeling like incarceration, full-time parenting, providing online, full-time educational learning for children is much too much. That is, if you can afford to be at home at all. Some of our workloads have produced a level of fatigue, particularly for some mothers and other caregivers, creating levels of despair, which is leading to depression. We indeed must lament. We must grieve how difficult this is and continues to be for so many. At once, it's also true that we recently heard the life expectancy for everyone has decreased during the pandemic. For African Americans, social scientists have stated the life expectancy during the pandemic is decreased by 3 years. 2 years for our Latinx communities and 1 year for those who are white. We also know as a country, the vaccines are being distributed in inequitable ways, and the world over, 75% of the vaccines are going to more wealthy countries, not where they are needed most. We must lament. Yes, give yourself time to lament, to grieve, to shout, scream, cry, and sometimes it feels laughable how it's going on. And we can continue to find beauty. Let us continue to reach out to others in even more innovative ways. Lean on and nurture your Unitarian Universalist faith and share what you are feeling. Let us also create. Let's create music, art, joy, and safe human touch where possible. Amen. I couldn't hear y'all. Amen. I would now like to invite us into a moment of prayer as we prepare our hearts and minds for today's Loved into Being service. Please take a few moments to locate your breath in your body. Take this moment to breathe deeply. Just notice where your breath is in your body without judgment. A moment of prayer. Spirit of life, love, nameless one, God. We gather in times of great peril for so many. Our social and political systems are in great upheaval, even as we are rising up to end all systemic oppressions. Yet, the COVID-19 virus continues to mutate even as the vaccines are being given. 10 million people have lost their jobs, with many of them, mostly Black and brown people, will never return to those very jobs. It's also true that millions in Texas and other parts of the globe are experiencing impacts of climate change, which will forever change their lives. Great Spirit, be with us now and them always. As we prepare our hearts and minds for the word today, please give us the courage to know that Unitarian Universalism can and does transform lives, and we have sacred, holy work to do to decenter whiteness within ourselves, each congregation, and our communities. Our communities and the world need our highest aspirations and ideals as a living faith tradition to rise up in all of us as we continue to love ourselves and each other into holy being. This is ongoing, demanding, sacred, yes, sacred work. And I believe we collectively can do it. Do you? Amen. Ashe. Blessed be. Shalom. Salam. And may it be so.
I would like to begin by acknowledging that I live in the traditional land of the people of the Three Fires. I am deeply honored and grateful to the land itself and to the people who have taken care of it for generations. And today I bring to you a quote from the process theologian Bernard Loomer, who says, by size, I mean the stature of a person's soul. I mean the range and depth of your love, your capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your own being and still maintain your integrity and individuality. The intensity and variety of outlook you can entertain in the unity of your being without feeling defensive or insecure. I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer in the development of their diversity and their uniqueness. I mean the power to sustain more complex and enriching tensions. I mean the magnanimity of concern to provide conditions that enable others to increase in stature. End of quote. Of the hundreds of books I had to read for seminary, of the thousands of passages that I read and highlighted and marked, this one has stayed with me the most. From the moment I read that quote, I was like, that is it. That is it. Because since I came from Cuba in 1995, I have been in many liberal religious circles, and we had been having in those circles this amazing conversation about what was out there, amazing conversations about the meaning of life, but no one was talking about what goes on in here. At the core of our being, no one was talking about our humanity and the struggles that come with being human, as well as the delights. This quote was talking about these tensions inside of us, the expansion, the volume, the range, the depth, the complexities of our humanity. Shall I read that quote again? Let's read it again. Here it is. By size, I mean the stature of a person's soul, the range and depth of your love, your capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your own being and still maintain your integrity and individuality. The intensity and variety of outlook you can entertain in the unity of your own being without feeling defensive or insecure. I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer in the development of their diversity and their uniqueness. I mean the power to sustain more complex and enriching tensions. I mean the magnanimity of concern to provide conditions that enable others to increase in stature. Here's another reason why I love that quote so much, why it resonated with me so much. It's particularly this line, I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer in the development of their diversity and uniqueness. I was like, what if that is the future of liberal religion? What if this is where we have failed by not encouraging others to become freer in the development of their own diversity and their uniqueness? The story of Madame Modifus is a story that is painfully familiar to me. Someone who came from another country, from another culture, and having to tone it down in order to fit in, because my whole self is not welcomed in some places. And what I know about the human soul is that it goes into hiding. It goes into hiding when we can be our full selves, our whole self. And that breaks my heart every single day, seeing what oppression and repression does to the human soul, to our core, to what is most authentic, most unique, most precious about us. What having to repress our life force does to our psyches. I know. And so this quote is asking us to grow the size of our soul, to expand, to open up and let in more perspectives and more languages and more cultures and more colors, more diverse wisdom, and to wrestle with how that contradicts our own worldview It is asking us not just to allow others their uniqueness, but to invest in the growth of others. That's my second favorite line. I mean the magnanimity of concern to provide conditions that enable others to increase in stature. And that is love, beloveds. That is love. That is love. That investment in creating the right conditions for all of us to grow and flourish. And you know what Zora Neale Hurston said about that, right? She said, love, make your soul crawl out from its hiding place. Love, make your soul crawl out from its hiding place. May we create more loving conditions. May we invest in love. May it be so. May it be so. Amen and Ashe.
Yes, love is what I need to know my name. These words from the artist Seal capture the meaning of our story today. The story of Jane and her discovery of her full self and her real name, Maudie. Jane's story captured my attention the first time I read it. Her words, I wasn't a real girl. I was a cardboard cutout of a girl. They stayed with me. It's clear the trauma and the pain of her home life. And this isn't unique or even uncommon for children, for any of us. So many of us know these experiences in our home lives, in our work lives, or in the stifling cultural conditions of oppression that seek to make us small, quiet, invisible. Conditions that seek to rob us of our fullness. But then something happens for Jane. Through the love of her grandmother, the generous embrace of the neighbors, and a little bit of imagination, Jane's full self, Maudie, finds expression. The freedom she experiences is in moments. Those moments when she's able to steal away from her house and go to her neighbors. But it is enough. These small moments of joy and love in the midst of the neglect and the suffering, they are life-saving. Zora Neale Hurston writes, love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding place. And that is exactly what Maudie's soul does. She is loved into the fullness of her being. I hear echoes of my own story in this story. And maybe you do too. For me, in a time of tremendous difficulty in my life, my UU church was the neighbor's house, full of warmth and welcome, music and imagination. And the grandmother, that was my Sunday school teachers, whose love and care, coupled with joy and attention, it made a difference in my life when I most needed it. That congregation, that community, those teachers, they helped me find my voice, my spirit, my soul. They loved me into being. I imagine that you too have stories like this. How Unitarian Universalism, its theology, its people, its ministry changed you, saved your life, helped your soul crawl out of its hiding space. How it helped grow the size of your soul. As process theologian Bernard Loomer so powerfully describes, by size, I mean the stature of a person's soul, the range and depth of your love, your capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your being and still maintain your integrity and individuality. There's so much expansiveness and generosity in Loomer's definition of the size of your soul. And he goes on. He says, I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer in the development in their diversity and uniqueness. I mean the magnanimity of concern to provide conditions that enable others to increase in stature. You see, Loomer is not just talking about individual growth and liberation. And this matters to us as Unitarian Universalists because our faith has never been solely about individual spiritual growth. As Unitarian Universalists, we understand salvation not as individual, but collective. We recognize the fundamental interconnectedness, interdependence of all life and of humanity. Foundational to the core theological idea of interdependence is that mutuality and responsibility are inherent to who we are as human beings. We are not islands. And our tradition calls us not to individual freedom or transformation alone, but to the liberation and thriving of all people. One of the most important and successful campaigns within Unitarian Universalism over this past year was UU the Vote, a national effort for Unitarian Universalists to partner with local grassroots organizing and voting rights groups on an unprecedented voter engagement, voter registration, and voter turnout effort. It was the first ever effort like this on our part as a larger association, and it was awesome. But here's something you may not know about UU the Vote. When I first shared the idea for UU the Vote at the 2019 General Assembly, I didn't know if it would take hold. I was simply throwing out a seed of a dream, imagining there before thousands of you, congregational delegates at GA, I asked, what if we as UUs helped engage and mobilize 1 million people to vote in the 2020 election? When I said that, it was scary. It seemed impossible. And in fact, the next time I talked about UU the Vote at a local congregation, I reduced the number to 500,000. But before we'd even started to create the team and the infrastructure, when we were still just talking about this idea, congregational leaders, ministers, religious educators, and members were clamoring to volunteer. Financial gifts began coming in, some unsolicited. Folks were ready to say yes, ready to give generously of their time and resources because they knew that our values of justice and compassion, that our system of democracy and the literal lives and well-being of our neighbors, of our loved ones, of each other were on the line and on the ballot. Thousands of people volunteered. Thousands of donors came forward from our congregations, many of you, and together we invested tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of hours and well over $1 million to vote love in the 2020 election. And in the end, we reached well over 3 million potential voters, far exceeding our wildest dreams. In what was the largest, most transparent and accessible election in our history, we UUs played a significant role. And we were likely the largest, most organized, faith-based, pro-democracy effort during the election. Wow. Imagination, generosity, commitment, collective action, these fueled UU the Vote. But there was also some magic to it, because it recognized our strengths and it invited us more fully into who we are. For we are the people who show up. We are the people who work together in community. We are people who believe in democracy, who understand our faith as active, who are concerned about the conditions of justice here and now, and who, when it comes right down to it, are a hopeful people. We are a hopeful people about what is possible and about our agency and capacity to meet the challenges of our time. Some of the magic of UU the Vote was that together we were loving each other into the fullness of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. But this isn't the end of the story. It is a reminder. It is a glimpse of what is possible when we say yes. When we say yes so generously and powerfully to what we believe in, to what we care about, to our ministries, our values, and when we choose solidarity, interdependence with wider networks of people working for justice, compassion, and liberation. From the beginning of my time as UUA president, I have said, this is no time for a casual faith, no time for a casual commitment to what you love most, and this is no time to go it alone. UU the Vote is just one example of what it looks like to take our faith, our values, and our commitment to interdependence seriously. It is life-saving, life-changing ministry, individually in our own lives, and revolutionary when we bring that powerful yes out into the world. And this yes is what is needed so deeply in our communities and our world right now. To love our society, to love our world into a new place of being. In her important book, Caste, Isabel Wilkerson explores the conditions of racism, white supremacy, and racial hierarchy as an American caste system. And in her book, she quotes Gary Michael Tartikoff, an American scholar of castes, who says of the United States, "This is a civilization searching for its humanity. It dehumanized others in order to build its civilization, and now it needs to find its own." There's power in those words and that history. So how do we find our humanity as a society, as a country, as a civilization? The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said the key was love. By love, King did not mean a sentimental or romantic kind of love, but rather an overflowing, audacious, and unconditional love that sought the fullest unfolding of every person. King said this love might well be the salvation of our civilization. The only way that we overcome the forces of racism, domination, discrimination, dehumanization, the forces that are at the foundation of the United States, those forces that have the effect of dehumanizing our society, the only way we overcome those forces is to turn to the deepest source of our humanity. And as Unitarian Universalists, we know that that foundation, that source of our humanity, is our compassion and our interdependence, our mutuality and relationship and responsibility to each other. In other words, I would take Bernard Loomer's words and King's words and say we need to grow the size of our love. And by size, as Loomer says, I mean the range and depth of your love, your capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your being. I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer, to provide conditions that enable others to increase their stature, the size of their love and their soul. And this is where the real spiritual depth and calling of our faith lives. Not just as an intellectual exercise, but as embodiment. Embodying and growing our capacity for this powerful form of love that encourages all of us to live into the fullness of our being and that is committed to the conditions that make this fullness possible for everyone. Compassion, interdependence. Looking back, the love of her grandmother, that trip to the church rummage sale, and the generous, inclusive embrace of her neighbors made a powerful difference to young Jane, to Maudie. Looking back, the warmth and magic of my UU church and the love and care of my Sunday school and youth leaders shaped my life and my calling in ways that I will always be grateful for and will never be able to repay. Looking back, UU the Vote became this incredible source of community, joy, and positive action in the midst of what was one of the most traumatic times in our lives. It drew us together in unprecedented ways and was a lifeline. And this is not the end of the story. It's just a glimpse, just a few stories to capture some of what is possible in all of our congregations when we say yes. When we say yes boldly, audaciously, powerfully to our values, to our spirits and our love, and to one another. These stories and more are happening all across our congregations. None of us will ever know all the difference that our generosity to our congregations has made to the lives of our children, our families, our elders, to the lives and conditions of our larger communities. We'll never know all the ways that we have helped make a difference. When we give boldly, generously, audaciously of our financial resources as we are able, we make our values and our ministry manifest in the world. When we give generously of our hearts and our care and our love to our children and families, elders and adults, young adults and youth, we change lives. We save lives. And when we dream big, as leaders and staff about the impact we are called to make in the wider world, lives are changed. The material conditions of our communities can change. We are changed. We make it possible. Loved into fullness, loved into being. May we keep saying yes, boldly, courageously, and lovingly to our values and our faith. May it be so.
Thanks for sticking with us, everyone. We have just one more short piece for you. And I want to mention, if there's anyone still listening on Zoom, we do know about the audio issues you've been experiencing, and we do know how to fix them, and we will get to it as soon as the service ends. So that, just wanted to let you know. So this is a sort of a slow courtly dance. Again, this is the third of the Susato.
I don't know about y'all, but I tear up or openly weep every time I hear Reverend Susan preach. What a gift. We will have coffee hour immediately following service in person on the patio or online at a separate link. You can find the link in the chat, on our website, in Compass, or on the final slide. Whether you attend online or in person, your civic engagement team and I have prepared a few coffee talk questions to discuss. So let us go in peace, in love, and in the spirit of yes. Let us love one another into being. Blessed be.